Now, something quite interesting came out today thanks to the reporting of John Rolfe at the Daily Telegraph. You see, the activist group GetUp, the mob which loves to hound Liberal candidates during election campaigns, conducts foul pranks against the likes of Tony Abbott, as we know, and berates others for not paying their legal share of tax, has some very interesting tax arrangements themselves. In fact, last financial year they paid no tax, none at all. I was joined earlier today by John Rolfe to try and work out what they call themselves and how they've been able to get away with it. John Rolfe, thank you very much for your time.
Great to talk to you, Chris.
Now tell me, GetUp has had a really successful past 12 months, according to their revenue files. What have you found?
It has been a good 12 months for GetUp, the activist organisation. We know that they were in the black to the tune of more than $1 million. Now, if I ran a business, a company, which is what they are, and it made a surplus of more than $1 million, I would expect to pay tax. But that's not what happens if you're GetUp.
Why is that? Because I understand that they're not necessarily a business, although you've got to say they do a lot of lobbying work for people who benefit. Like, for instance, the Labor Party. They do a lot of lobbying work for those who are in the Green movement. So it's a little bit of a grey area, isn't it?
Some people certainly do think of them as being a business, a lobbying business or a media business, but technically they are a not-for-profit. Now, not all not-for-profits don't have to pay tax. Many do have to pay tax. Charities don't have to pay tax, but GetUp is not a charity. The reason that GetUp does not pay tax is that it got a private ruling from the ATO. And the ATO determined that because most of GetUp's income was donations that were given voluntarily and weren't from trading activity, then it wasn't assessable income. And that's why GetUp was able to add back the $357,000 that were I running a company that I would have to pay. So that's the difference between a regular company that you might find operating down the street and GetUp. But it does have some of the hallmarks of a media business or a lobbying outfit.
Yeah, without doubt. So they've got this private decision made, and yet they did pay tax thinking they were going to be taxed. Is that what you're saying?
No, the way that their accountants did the books, they made it clear that there would have been a tax expense were it not for the fact that they had this private ruling that allows them to basically turn that into zero by adding it back. So they're just going through the motions of showing how they reached the number of zero when it came to their income tax expense. Now, the ATO only made this ruling in the past couple of years. There's been a lot of question marks over GetUp and the way that it does treat donations, and I've looked at that in the past, including during the last election campaign. I did a story, Chris, in which Deakin University academics freely gave an opinion on several years' worth of GetUp finances. And they said that there were more questions that GetUp had to answer about why they were deferring income and why they were treating their donations as non-assessable. Now, this was before the private ruling. How did GetUp respond to that? I gave them the entire, from go to woe of what Deakin had told me. Well, rather than respond to my questions, they went to the university and forced the academics to retract what they said. That's how GetUp rolls. They are an organisation that argues for a free media, but then when they come under criticism, this is how they respond.
They didn't like these current questions you put to them, right?
No, they tried to make me feel like I was an idiot, as if I couldn't read a balance sheet, but it's there in black and white. They criticise others for not paying tax. They've had a go at companies including Santos for not paying tax, but they twist the figures. They twist it. They will say, well, why is it that on billions of dollars of revenue, Santos paid no tax? Well, it's because they made a loss. You don't pay tax on revenue in Australia. And when they do make a profit, they pay hundreds of millions of dollars in tax.
Yeah, that's right. You pay tax on your profit. You don't pay tax on your losses.
That's right. And they also criticised Santos and other companies for carrying forward those losses. Well, that's part of business. Otherwise, you wouldn't invest. If you're going to build a mine, if you're going to do some exploring, you will run up losses and then you're allowed to use those losses later on. Same if you're a gas company. So there's nothing wrong with what Santos was doing. And it's paying hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in tax and being criticised because it has a high revenue figure and then doesn't pay tax in the year it makes a loss. And we must remember here that GetUp made those criticisms of figures that were old. It should have used the current figures for Santos, which would have found that Santos had paid several hundred millions of dollars and had made that fact public 10 months before GetUp launched its broadside.
It's interesting. It can launch an attack like that, but it doesn't like inquiries of the same kind directed towards itself. I don't know. Maybe I'm not too smart, John. I still don't get this. They're not a charity. They're a not-for-profit, but they don't pay tax, and yet there are not-for-profits who do pay tax, and they're also not a lobby group. What the hell are they?
It is a little bit confusing. I think we are in a grey area here. I think they operate close to the margin. That's why there have been questions in the past. Clearly, what they're doing is legitimate. I'm not saying that what they're doing is not legitimate. However, questions have been raised in the past. They had to go and get this private ruling because they weren't sure either. So we do know that it's certainly not smack bang in the middle. It's not standard operating procedure in Australia. And they're getting $10 to $12 million in the door each year from donors. That is revenue, that is income, but it's not accessible courtesy of this private ruling. They
have to expose or list the donors that they have at their disposal. They have to mention them to the AEC, don't they?
That's right. So all up, about 60,000 people a year donate usually very small sums to GetUp and other groups like it. But then when it's a larger amount, it is something you have to disclose to the AEC. So there are some details available of who their donors are.
Right. Nothing occurs to you irregular?
When I looked at it, nothing jumped out at me. Right. I think it's something that would warrant a closer look, but in the context of looking at their financials, on a first glance, everything seemed, kosher.
And you can't determine whether there are foreign donations, because I noticed in your comments section on the Telegraph this afternoon, there was a reader's comment that suggested, well, if they're getting foreign donations, shouldn't that be probed for a possible foreign interference? Makes sense, the question, but that's if they're getting foreign donations.
Look, that is something I have yet to look into. We love our readers' comments. They often have much better ideas for stories than the ones that we're already pursuing. So it's certainly something that I'm going to look into. I think it's really important to understand that, where the money is coming from and what that might mean and what further disclosures might be required.
Well done on the follow-up story. Thank you so much for your time, John.
Great to talk.